Hi, it's Arthur Aidala with These City Streets. You know what we want you to do? We want you to subscribe because you're never going to be bored. You're going to have law, you're going to have city, you're going to have real life. So subscribe. Hit one of those buttons wherever it is. Subscribe to Arthur Aidala, These City Streets. Today we have Megyn Kelly, the one and only Megyn Kelly, who can be heard on Sirius XM Radio, channel 111, weekdays every day from noon until 2 p.m. She's on YouTube. She's on Facebook. She's everywhere you can look right now. Let's talk to Megyn Kelly.
It's Arthur Aidala.
If my math is correct, Megyn Kelly, I think you may get more viewers now combining those two a month than you did when you had the #1 show on the #1 cable network. Am I correct about that?
Oh yeah. I mean, if you add up all the views we have between, we're on Sirius XM, YouTube, Facebook, all of it, it dwarfs what I got on Fox. Which is interesting, I wasn't sure whether it would work at all. So it's rewarding to be able to do it on my own.
But how did we get here as an industry, number one? And then the bigger question is, what effect has it had on society, whether it's politics or others, that you're able to do this now? You don't need millions of dollars. You don't need a huge staff to have the enormous impact that you now have.
Well, the industry destroyed itself. And some of us have risen up from the ashes to rebuild the next generation of news, because the old generation died. It was a suicide. And something had to go forward because people need news content. So it's not that they don't exist any longer. It's just that they've sacrificed their model, their credibility, the trustworthiness that they once had, their relationship with their audience. It all died. It was dying a slow and painful death, and then Trump was the death knell that really kind of ended it. And that was a good thing. So that's what led to the need and the, for new voices and new avenues and sort of the existence of it, the creation of it. And this lane was opened and started by others besides me. I just happened to see it and be open-minded to it, because when I left NBC, I was sitting on my couch thinking, I don't know if I want to go back into the industry at all. It's full of toxic, disgusting people. They're everywhere in news. I can't imagine working for another person who's going to tell me I have to follow his editorial judgment, not my own. And in the mainstream, there's nothing but that. So what am I going to do?
I didn't get the sense that anybody was really putting their thumb on the scale regarding you and the content of any of your shows, your morning show, your midday show, or your evening show. Am I wrong about that?
Yes and no. No one ever told me you have to say this or you have to say it this way. But the content that we offered on Fox News was determined from above. I mean, there would be a morning editorial meeting where, and this is not unusual, it's not something nefarious, it's just Fox News had a point of view in the world, and they would drive what the shows covered through their editorial bosses, which for the most part was Roger, but also underneath him, he had underlings who would look at the news and say, this is the big story. This is what Roger's interested in. And there would be stories from time to time that I'd want to cover that you knew they didn't like, that they didn't really want you to cover. Maybe you could get away with it one night, but that was it. Certain guests who I wanted to put on who, if they didn't like them because they'd said something rude about another host, etc., I couldn't use them. And so little things like that. And then at NBC, it was as bad as it could get when it comes to content control. I mean, Fox was the best, and I think still is the best of the ones that are out there, but they still have their own strong controls on what goes out on their airwaves. And NBC is Fox on steroids times 10 million. I mean, literally controlling every word that you are saying, or at least trying to. I was anchoring a show, and you're supposed to ask your own questions as the anchor. And they wanted to dictate exactly the questions I would ask and how I would ask them. And I said, no, I'm not. That's literally my job. I'm happy to take information from the producers on the segments. That's in part what producers do. But I ask what's interesting to me. There was one case, it was so egregious, Arthur. It was on the Supreme Court case involving the baker in Colorado who wouldn't do the cake for the gay wedding. And I was having the baker on the show. Now, I practiced law, as you know, for almost a decade. I covered the Supreme Court for Fox for 3 years and went on to do legal commentary for Fox, another 10 plus. I've got a history with the law. They gave me some producer who had just come to NBC from Al Jazeera, had zero legal background, and this woman was upset I wouldn't ask her questions. It was unbelievable. I was like, thank you. I appreciate the suggestions. God bless. I'll take it under advisement. And then I went out and asked all my own questions, and they were upset. It turned into a thing. Not because I asked bad questions, just because her little feelings were hurt. I can't operate like that. It was never going to work for me at a place that was that controlling. I did not realize it was going to be like that for me. It didn't work on a number of levels. That wasn't the only one, as people know. But in any event, they were very, very controlling. Fox was less controlling, but just still more so than I wanted at this point in my career.
How has that affected, let's just start off with the world of politics.
When I first launched this show, it was September of 2020. And it was, in the midst of COVID and the election and Black Lives Matter craziness, all those things. And I just needed to get off the couch. I really back to that other discussion. I knew I could not stay on the couch any longer. Didn't care whether it was going to have 2 viewers or 2 million viewers. I knew I needed to just get out there and set the record straight on some of the insanity that was out there. And I really didn't know, Arthur. At first, we launched with just audio, no video. I didn't know whether anybody would tune in. And I've told a story before. My therapist was like, well, I'll listen and Doug will listen. So okay, I got those too.
Megyn Kelly has a therapist? I thought you are the therapist.
This guy, he's so underpaid. The number of things that have happened over the past 10 years that he's gotten me through, I love this guy. He's brilliant. And so over time, we started to build the show and people started to tune in. But I will say that, we've gone from that, September of 2020, to where we are now, which is early 2024. But let's just go back to, apples to apples, fall of 2023. And we interviewed DeSantis, we interviewed Haley, we interviewed Vivek, we did a sit down with former President Trump. They all came to us, all of them. So in those 3 years, we went from 2 listeners to millions and to getting all of the major players. And I hosted a presidential debate. So the industry has dramatically changed. You're picking up on something for sure, which is people are learning to consume media in a different way. And the people who make news, like Trump or the presidential candidates, et cetera, are also understanding that and are treating it as an important lane. Both of those two things needed to happen for it to succeed.
Where does Megyn Kelly go to find some news?
I don't go to television news anymore, almost ever. It takes a lot for me to get me to turn on the television for my news. I'm so over it. I think people can relate to what I'm saying. I'm just so over. It's like this formulaic approach. I know, like you just said, I know exactly what I'm going to get. It's the same old players who have been there forever saying the same old things. It's very rare that you actually learn something. If there's something breaking where you really want to see it in the moment, okay, maybe that's something, whether it's a sports event or a plane crash, God forbid, something like that. Yeah, I might. But short of that, I'm almost entirely digital now. I've got my favorite podcasts. I download them all. I listen to them on 2.0 speed so I can take in a ton of information very fast and on my own terms. It's an acquired taste. I can even listen to my pal Ben Shapiro on 2.0, which is like a personal point of pride. Yeah, you got to earn that because he's a fast talker to begin with. But I love being able to get my news that way. And I love being able to say, okay, I know what I'm going to get. From the National Review guys, I know I'm going to get more old school traditional Republicans. I'm going to go to the Federalist for more Trump populism. I'm going to go to the New York Times, the Daily, for something that's more left wing. NPR, I know I'm getting left wing propaganda, but that's good. I like to hear what they're saying. I could keep going, but I've got my legal favorites who I go to for smart legal analysis.
I'd like to hear that.
I mean, you got to go. We need Arthur Aidala out there. That's why I put you on my show all the time. But I love Andy McCarthy. I mean, he's brilliant. He's one of the legal voices you can trust. And then it depends on the case. Like on the Murdoch case, I've got a podcast I listen to. And, you got to kind of go through them. On Depp versus Heard, Law and Crime was amazing. So I'm a consumer of it. I'm a pretty avid consumer of it. And I have my favorites. And if something new comes up, I'll find a new favorite. I didn't know that much about Sam Bankman-Fried when that first broke. So I started listening to a bunch of podcasts, like Wall Street Journal stuff that I had never tried. It's so a la carte. And I love that. I love that it's a la carte. And I love that I don't have to make it through like the boring middle half of your standard Fox or CNN programming to get to the next top of the hour where the hot stories are. I can have it whenever I want it if I stay in the digital lane.
Anyone who knows you or listens to you knows, you talk about your nana. So you were a granddaughter, and you're a daughter and a sister, and now you're a mom and a wife. They just had the 50-year anniversary of Happy Days. The American Family was based around some of these shows. You wanted to eat dinner at a certain time, so you could either be watching the news simultaneously or finish dinner. So at 8 o'clock on, I think it was Channel 7, you could watch Happy Days. How has the on-demand world changed society?
First of all, I want to spend 1 second on that memory lane because you brought up a lot of good memories for me too. That's how I grew up too. You used to watch Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley every Tuesday night. That's how it was, 8 to 8:30, right? And then on Saturday nights, we do Love Boat, right? And Fantasy Island. Yeah, hey. And by the way, not for nothing, but is Leather Tuscadero, has she been reincarnated in the form of Suzanne Vega? They looked exactly the same.
By the way, Megyn Kelly, you know what Fonzie's first name was, right?
Arthur Fonzarelli. Of course, I know my 70s trivia. Please, that's all I did was watch TV. I have no culture other than those references. So yeah, and we were that same family. I mean, our big show as a family for when I was really young, we used to watch the Waltons. But my mom was obsessed with the Jeffersons, and we would, especially it was sad after my dad died and it was just us in the house, but we would watch the Jeffersons religiously because it made my mom laugh and it made all of us laugh. And then she got into a Golden Girls thing, and that show was huge. But you're right, family life, at least, for like working class, middle class families, in large part often revolved around the television. Little House on the Prairie, that was like my spiritual teacher.
How has that affected us as the American family? Because I think that ties into the world of politics as well.
Well, I mean, hopefully families are doing what my family's doing, which is you have a different way of consuming entertainment. You can still go on Netflix. You can go on YouTube. You don't have to spend a bunch of money on Netflix if you don't want. My kids wanted to watch, I had mentioned the film, it's from the 90s, the Texas cheerleader murdering mom. Remember the absolutely true story of the Holly Hunter starred in it. And we couldn't find it anywhere. I went to YouTube. I don't know if it was a bootleg or what it was, but it was right there. Some guy named Chris had uploaded it, and we watched the whole thing as a family. Sick. It's sick. No one actually dies in the film. Anyway, spoiler alert. So I think there's just so many other options. Like, and you go to Netflix, there's such a variety. You can do crime dramas, you can do love stories, you can do thrillers, whatever your heart desires. Never mind if you have more than Netflix. So I think the television still plays a role. It's just you consume it differently.
So how has Donald Trump, more than maybe any human being on the planet Earth ever, how did he become the master of this universe?
Well, the number one thing he does is he is an entertaining, I've called him the walking ball of charisma. Because the best way to get coverage on any outlet, whether it's digital or print or cable or broadcast, is to be someone who rates, someone who drives the numbers. Because most of these people are capitalists and they want money. And that means putting on things that rate or get clicks or do well. And Donald Trump is that in every way, shape, and form. So that's the best thing he does. That's why he got $3 billion in what's called earned media in the 2016 election. He just was either so entertaining, so compelling, or so controversial, they couldn't take their eyes or their lenses off of him.
Do you take either credit or blame for some of that? Because if you rewind the clock and you go back to August of 2015, that first debate, that question you asked, the Rosie O'Donnell question, I mean, that's what, kaboom.
You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. Your Twitter account
Only Rosie O'Donnell.
No, it wasn't. For the record, it was well beyond Rosie O'Donnell.
That really blew him up, and Breitbart went off the wall, and they went on the massive attack against Megyn Kelly. So how much of a role does Megyn Kelly take in launching Donald Trump's media sensation?
Well, I mean, Trump was number one when he went into that debate, so I don't think that I did it. But look, the only reason that question became such news is because Trump made it news. If you go back and look at that debate, all the questions that we had for those guys in that first round were A+ level questions. No one got away easy. It's just that Trump made a big deal out of his and wouldn't let it go. So it became a news story for months on end. And then everything I did, he was upset about. So he liked it. He liked the story, and he just kept it going.
He sent out a tweet at 3:40 in the morning in 2015 saying you did a horrible job. I remember you had to have security around you and your family. I mean, is it as bad as it sounds and feels?
Yeah, it was terrible. I won't lie. I've talked about it before, and I've written about it in my book, but it got very bad. It got very threatening, and it got dangerous. I think less so today when he goes after somebody because people are more used to it. It's kind of like, oh, that's Trump. But it was so new what he does. And from a presidential candidate, we had never seen anything like this. And the things he was saying were, somewhat graphic and so on. So it's just the threat level in all areas of my life ramped up. And I had young children, so it was bad. But I'll tell you something's interesting to me about it, Arthur, because so many in the media and Trump detractors come and they say, how can you say anything complimentary about this guy? Some people think I'm like, quote, a supporter. And, after everything he put you through. And I have the same answer for them, which is I try not to make the news about myself. I tried mightily, even that year. It was the most challenging time for me in doing that. And I try to this day, plus I can, as an individual, I could vote for somebody who I don't like and who doesn't like me. I really can.
How did you guys make up? Because you just did an interview with him recently.
Yeah, I went to Trump Tower. Sean Hannity tried to help stand him down. He couldn't. Roger Ailes tried to stand him down. He couldn't. Others tried. They couldn't. And finally, Arthur, I just went one day to Trump Tower. I just went. Brian Kilmeade had helped me get his okay for it. I did have his permission to come see him. And I showed up at Trump Tower by myself, and the doorman had eyes like silver dollars when he saw me walking. He was like, oh my God. He knew.
Was this when he was president-elect?
No, it was before. It was before he was elected. It was about, I remember it was in like April, I think, and the whole blow up with the debate had been the previous August. And I went in there, and as soon, Trump, as soon as he saw me, as soon as sort of he had received the gesture of me going to him, he completely changed. He was very magnanimous. He was very kind. He gave me a big hug. He told me he loved the Kelly file, which he had been calling for a boycott of for months. Anyway, we've pretty much been good since then. I mean, we're not in love with one another.
When you interviewed him recently, you're not exactly known to just be throwing softballs at him.
I will say, I think for whatever reason, the friction between Trump and yours truly works on television and when we're sitting across from each other, and he's used it to his advantage, and I certainly benefited from having him for that interview. But I will never be a Trump sycophant, and anybody who's looking for that in their coverage should keep on looking someplace else.
I think that's why people respect you. I want to ask you about one other person who I read, I think maybe it was in your book, Putin. You interviewed Putin, Vladimir Putin. And you were somewhat complimentary of him, off camera, which I'm not surprised. I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, Megyn, but usually people who rise to that level, they have a personality, they have a charisma, they have a magnetism to them. That's how they got there. Did you experience that with Vladimir Putin?
Oh, very much so. I mean, he in the following way, he's like Trump. If he wants to charm you, you're going to be charmed. You're going to feel, just sort of flattered by his attentions, because this is an extremely powerful person who generally as a very strong man. And for him to be doing anything other than being the strong man and taking a moment to compliment you or flatter you or pay you attention is a thing. It's like, wow, okay, it's Vladimir Putin. This is all pre-Ukraine, but it's kind of irrelevant. He'd done a lot of bad things back then too. But I also understood fully that this is a former KGB guy and that he'd read my book and that he was very well aware of how to try to manipulate me, and that all of those things were an effort at doing that. So I had to be on my guard and not be taken by his behavior. He tried to compliment me as a mother. He tried to sort of mention his love for his own mother. He tried to suggest like he liked me, romantically in some certain ways and whatever. He tried a number of ways to soften me up. And then when we went out there, because I actually wound up interviewing him 3 different times, 3 separate pieces, and we went at it. I mean, it was tense, and you don't often see that with Putin because they have killed journalists over there in the past. So it's, there were some risks in doing it, but I had a sense I could get away with it, and I did, and I left Russia on relatively good terms with him back then.
You talk about Putin reading your book. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Donald Trump never read your book. And I would say as of today, there's a 50-50 shot that he's going to be the next president of the United States. In your last interview with him, knowing him now the years and following him, is he still on his game? Is he ready to go?
Well, I don't think there's any comparison between Trump and Biden. Trump can run circles around Biden when it comes to his mental acuity. That's been very clear. And I saw that up front when I spoke with Trump just this past September. But I also don't think Trump is the same as he was back in 15, 16. And you can see that in some of his public comments. He was saying he's worried we're going to get into World War II. He continues to refer to Biden as Obama. He just referred to Nikki Haley as Nancy Pelosi, or reversed that, Nancy Pelosi as Nikki Haley, like repeatedly. He's made a couple of other gaffes. Look, when you speak as much as Trump does publicly, you're going to have some. But like the forgetfulness, what city he's in, some of that is undoubtedly age-related. He is human. He is human. He's 77 years old. Now, this is the person who the Republican voters have said they want. So that's what we're going to get. That's fine. But if the dominant question in terms of who we nominate or who we elect is who's the sharpest mentally, that's probably not the guy we would have gone with. We probably would have gone with Ron DeSantis, who's young and, as he says, would have been ready to spit nails day one. It's not to say Trump can't do it, but, my obligation is to be honest with my audience, not to just do puffery around Trump. He's lost a couple steps, but he's still way stronger than Biden.
Is that the best part of now hosting the Megyn Kelly show on all these platforms? Do you have zero handcuffs on you and you determine, what you're going to say, and the honesty part, you don't have to worry about anything anymore? Is that the best part?
Yes. Well, that, and I wear Lululemon pants every day. Those 2 things.
Who is the up and coming that you look at, Megyn Kelly, who's maybe in their 20s or 30s and they're doing a podcast or a video cast or they're on regular television, that you're like, hey, I think that kid's got it?
I don't know that there's somebody who I see as like the next me, but I'll tell you, I really like Will Cain over at Fox. That's somebody who I think is a very talented journalist, and I like what he's doing. I love Emily Jashinsky over at The Federalist. I have her on my show monthly. She's very talented, young, dynamic, sees the world in a different kind of way. And there are others too. It's just, you don't want to look for the next me. As Roger Ailes once said to me, don't try to be anyone other than yourself, because there's only one you and there only ever will be. So you don't want to copy anybody. And I don't see anybody else in my own model either. I appreciate them for their own styles.
It used to be, there were 7 newspapers in the city of New York. They're like, now there's really kind of one, the New York Post.
Yes.
I know. And Megyn Kelly's on a regular basis. And there was something yesterday about Joy Reid and Mothers for Justice and the book about boys are blue or not all boys are blue. And it's a very graphic book about a young person covers sexual assault, pedophilia, and incest. And you did what most people don't do, is you called another host an idiot. Joy Reid, I believe that was. Talk to me about, number one, your feelings about, as a mother, about that book being available in a public library. And number two, when do you decide to go that far to call a host of a major network an idiot?
In my defense, she is. She is. She's so dumb. She's very strange. I'm sorry, what kind of a pervert makes it her cause to get books about anal rape in the K through 12 public school libraries? You've lost your way, madam. You need to reassess. And she's obviously not smart, because you watch her argue whenever anybody scores a point on her, whether it was Tiffany Justice of Moms for Liberty or anybody else. She immediately starts interrupting them. She gets scared. She doesn't have the mental acuity. I know she went to Harvard. We all know it's not hard to get into Harvard, depending on the identity boxes you check. So please spare me. She's not very smart. But my point is, number one, there's no book banning. It's not happening. And so her whole thing was built on a lie. She was cross-examining her like, why would you prevent this from being seen by the children? You know what? If you're some sicko mother and you want your kid to read about anal rape in an incestual way when he's a kid, go to the public bookstore and buy it.
Joy Reid's argument was there may be a kid who's suffering like that, and that book may help them in some form or another. And I believe the Mothers Against Tiffany Justice said, if there's a kid who's suffering like that, we should doing a lot more than just getting him a book about it. We should basically be, protecting that kid.
Yes, that was her point, and I agree with Tiffany. However, the proper response to that argument is, you've got these two things at the bottom of your legs. They're called feet, and they will take you right into the public library where you can get any of this. Or you can go on Amazon and buy this book for $9. Do it. That you have no right as a parent to have your kid accessing that kind of material next to my kid in the school library, where I am paying for the books that are in there, and I am paying to have my child educated in the terms of history and math and reading and social studies, and not anal rape and not strap-on dildos, which is from another book. You can take your sick predilections and get off someplace else away from my kid, who I don't want harmed with that information. All the studies, all of them, show that exposing a child to that stuff at a too soon in their life, can cause lasting damage. That's why we have R-rated movies, and we don't just put Eyes Wide Shut on broadcast television in the middle of the day. We agree as a society to certain standards, and Joy Reid plays by those rules, except when it comes to incestual anal rape. That's the one rule. We got to get that in front of the kiddos. It's a no, Joy. It's a no.
Speaking of pornography, what are your thoughts about Lauren's outfit these days? Do you see any time soon that your daughter would ever, even on Halloween, dress in that kind of attire?
That's also a no. I don't know what Lauren Sanchez is doing to herself. I really don't. She looks dramatically different just from when she started dating Jeff Bezos. And with all the money that she has, you would think she'd be able to find something close to a classy outfit. But this woman's my age. I'm 53. I think she's 53. And every day I am seeing like her midriff exposed, her enormously enhanced breasts. And then on top of that—
Are they enhanced? Are they enhanced, Megyn?
Okay. Even Lauren Sanchez would not deny that. I have nothing against women or men doing what they want to themselves when it comes to surgery, whatever. That's your business. What I do object to is the exposition of said assets in a lacy overlay on top of what is basically a thong as she walks around in public. I don't want to have to look at it. I don't want my kid to have to look at it. And I do wish that the richest man in the world, who's a very famous American, would try to up his own game and up the game of his companion there, so that little girls who are looking at this couple, who admire somebody like Jeff Bezos for his business accomplishments, could look at her and maybe think about the fact that she was a pilot or that she was a successful news anchor, as opposed to look at the enormous breasts completely exposed coming at me. Maybe it's just me, but I don't think it is.
There you have it, from refreshingly honest, and that's what she's achieved now because she's her own boss, and I know what that feels like. It's great. Megyn, thank you so much. You are, I believe, the only person to ever leave the #1 news channel and actually be successful. There's one or two here or there, but it is no one has exceeded what they had when they were the #1 show on prime time on the #1 network. So accolades to you and your husband, who's helped you so much along the way, and your whole team right around you.
Thank you, Arthur. And thanks to you as well for helping me make us a success. Your legal segments, you and Mark Eiglarsh, are TV gold. And it doesn't matter whether it's traditional TV or digital TV. Everybody loves those segments.
Well, as do we. Thank you for finding the time, Megyn. I really appreciate it.
God bless. See you soon.
Bye.